Hi, welcome to the Rewind the Timeline podcast brought to you by thetimelinemachine.com. I am your host, the Timeline King. This is the show where we go back in time and talk about all the anniversaries that have happened this past week, whether it is 10 year, 25 year, 35 year, 50 years, etc. For this episode, this is episode 15, we will be looking at all the anniversaries that have happened from July 9th all the way until July 15th. So let us begin. Before we begin, though, I would like to talk about the movie Stuck in Love. I mentioned it on the last podcast episode, acknowledging its 10th anniversary. So, Stuck in Love had a limited theatrical release on July 5th. Stuck in Love is directed by Josh Boone, who also did The Fault in Our Stars in 2014 and The New Mutants in 2020. When I recorded last week's episode, I hadn't yet seen Stuck in Love, but I later found the movie on YouTube and was able to check it out. I absolutely fell in love with this movie. It's a romantic comedy drama, and it plays with the idea of unrequited love. It's a family of four, and they're all dealing with people who don't quite love them in the same way. So the main character, played by Greg Kinnear, is a writer, and he is raising his son and daughter to also be writers as well. So he is telling them that if they want to write about love, they have to experience love themselves and all its heartbreak. As someone who has wanted to be a writer for a lot of my life, this was a story that definitely appealed to me. Now, Stuck in Love has a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I don't know if this is a film that will appeal to everyone, but I like it enough to recommend it. The movie is available to watch for free on most streaming services. You can find it easily on Tubi, Pluto, YouTube, Crackle, Prime, or whatever. I'd recommend checking it out and making up your own mind. Now let's continue with the rest of the episode. First, we begin with July 9th. This is 10 years ago, July 9th, 2013. We have the release of the novel Star Wars Crucible by Troy Denning. Now, 2013 was an interesting time with Star Wars. Disney had just bought Lucasfilm, so they owned Star Wars outright, but we were still a couple of years away from getting The Force Awakens and the beginning of Disney milking the Star Wars cow for all it was worth. Nowadays, we have so much Star Wars live action media with the movies and shows, but back in 2013, it was still only the 6 movies, the Clone Wars TV show, and everything else was the Star Wars Expanded Universe books and comics. The people who made the Star Wars Expanded Universe, the EU, made a deliberate attempt to make sure that everything was tied together and fed off of each other. The EU explored like what happened with Han, Luke, and Leia in the decades following Return of the Jedi. So before we had the sequel trilogy, these books and comics were the only way to get any kind of continuation for the Star Wars saga. Unfortunately, when Disney bought Star Wars and announced Episode 7, us Star Wars fans kind of knew that this was going to be it for the original expanded universe. No way would Disney let these books and comics that only 1% of the audience probably even knew existed keep them from telling the story that they wanted to tell. It was sad, but such is life. So this book, Star Wars Crucible, right, was the last novel released before we got a big expanded universe reboot that was supposed to match the continuity of The Force Awakens. Crucible was originally meant to be the final novel. No, actually, Crucible originally wasn't meant to be the final novel. At the time, they were still advertising a Sword of the Jedi trilogy starring Jaina Solo that was forthcoming. But I can say in hindsight, it does work well as an ending for Han, Luke, and Leia. I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that Crucible is a great novel, but I think it does service to Han, Luke, and Leia way better than what we got with the sequel trilogy. In my opinion, Episode 7 should have been another big adventure with the big three, not a Han dies and Luke becomes a hermit movie. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you want to see your favorite characters act like the ones you love, I recommend this book. Happy 25 years to Star Wars Crucible. So happy 10 years to Star Wars Crucible. Next we go to July 10th. This is 25 years ago, July 10th, 1998. We have the release of the following movies. Pi, Lethal Weapon 4, Madeline, and Small Soldiers. I haven't seen Pi, but it is directed by Darren Aronofsky, who has done a bunch of other films that I like, such as Black Swan. So I assume this is good. Everybody says it's good. Lethal Weapon 4 is another one that I have not watched, so I can't comment one way or the other. But it was directed by Richard Donner, who did the first Superman. Another great director. Now let's get to the third one, Madeline. I was a big fan of the cartoon when it aired on the Disney Channel. In an old house in Paris that was covered in vines lived 12 little girls in two straight lines. The smallest one was Madeline. Oh ho ho, Madeline. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think this live action movie did a good job of translating the cartoon very well. I always feel like something is lost when you go from animation to live action, and you've seen that in movies like The Flintstones, Scooby Doo, and unfortunately, Madeline isn't really an exception to that. And lastly, we get to Small Soldiers. This movie feels like somebody saw Toy Story and thought, "Yo, why don't we do a live action version of this where the toys are actually scary and try to kill people?" Then after that, somebody else thought, let's actually try to make this a kid friendly film instead. So this movie ends up being like a weird mishmash. The movie is rated PG-13, but it feels like a kids movie with its main character being a young Gregory Smith and a young Kirsten Dunst. I don't think the story is that great, but the visuals are really good, and they still hold up like 25 years later. I also really like the third act where we get to see a huge battle between one toy faction and another. It is as insane as it sounds. However, the whole time I was thinking, like, there's no way that the toys could have survived all these explosions. Like, one thing I should mention about this movie is that it was the last live action role of Phil Hartman, who sadly was killed by his wife a couple of months prior to this film. The movie is dedicated in his honor in a quick post-credit scene. So yeah, happy 25 years to Pi, Lethal Weapon 4, Madeline, and Small Soldiers. Alright, let's move on. Next is July 11th. This is 10 years ago, July 11th, 2013. We have the premiere of the Netflix original series Orange is the New Black. So Netflix first started streaming back in 2007, but 2013 was the first year that Netflix had their own original programming. Netflix's first original show was House of Cards, which debuted in February of 2013. And then in March of 2013, they had another show called Bad Samaritans. Then in April 2013, they had released a horror series called Hemlock Grove. After that, in May, so we had the fourth season of Arrested Development. And then finally, like in June we got Orange is the New Black. Admittedly, I've never seen this show. Actually, I haven't seen a lot of like Netflix originals, but a lot of people say Orange is the New Black is pretty good. It is also Netflix's longest running show. It lasted until 2019 for 7 seasons and 91 episodes. And given how soon like Netflix is to cancel TV shows nowadays, I don't see this record being surpassed anytime soon. So happy 10 years to Orange is the New Black. Next is July 12th. We have a bunch of stuff on this day. First is 100 years ago. This is July 12th, 1923. We have the birth of science fiction writer James Gunn. Not to be confused with film director James Gunn, who recently did Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and is currently running DC Studios. James Edwin Gunn is considered a popular science fiction author. I haven't really read any of his work, but people say that he is good. The dude only died recently at the age of 97, so he lived a great and long life. The most recommended work of his that I see is the short story The Immortals, which was adapted into a TV movie and series. So check both of those out if you get the chance. Happy 100th birthday to James Edwin Gunn. Next is 75 years ago, July 12th, 1948. We have the birth of Ben Burtt. Ben Burtt is a famous sound designer for film and TV. He has done a bunch of movies, including Indiana Jones, E.T., Wall-E. But his biggest claim to fame is the Star Wars franchise. Now, all the sounds that you associate with Star Wars, like Darth Vader's breathing, like R2D2's beeps and whistles, or the lightsaber hum, whatever. This guy helped create it. And now George Lucas gets credit for the Star Wars stories, like, but without Ben Burtt, like Star Wars would sound totally different. And I think we really should honor him for his contributions. So happy 75th birthday to Ben Burtt. Next, also 75 years ago, again on July 12th, 1948, we have the birth of Richard Simmons. Now, before the days of YouTube, Richard Simmons' fitness videos is what everybody depended on for losing weight. I'm a little too young to have ever needed to rent one of Richard Simmons' videos, but I always knew about the guy through the references made to him in popular culture. One of his videos showed up in a scene in Space Jam. Like the Looney Tunes are watching him on TV, and he says like, "You're doing it. You're becoming mighty." My favorite reference to him though is in an episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns unleashes a robotic Richard Simmons on Homer. All the robotic version of him, it just says like shake 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 your boot. I was laughing hysterically at that scene. Now, what is weird about like Simmons is that he mysteriously vanished from the public eye around like 2014. So his fitness business closed it down that same year, and he hasn't shown up to like any Hollywood parties or red carpets since then. So there's like a lot of speculation on like what exactly happened to this guy. The guy seems to be a recluse right now. But if anybody's interested in checking out his like old videos, they're all uploaded on YouTube. Shake your booty on Richard Simmons' 75th birthday. Alright, next is 35 years ago on July 12th, 1988. We have the release of the comic book series Wolverine. Now, the character of Wolverine made his debut as an X-Men character all the way back in 1974, and he quickly became popular. A lot of it had to do with his anti-hero personality and his mysterious backstory. So there was definitely like a lot of potential to flesh him out and see how he became who he is. Chris Claremont and Frank Miller did a Wolverine miniseries in 1982 that is considered like one of the best Wolverine stories ever. Wolverine was also a headlining character in the anthology series Marvel Comics Presents, but this is the book where he finally receives his own ongoing series. Chris Claremont wrote the book initially, and he said at the time that he wanted it to be as divorced from X-Men as possible, so that meant like Wolverine wouldn't be wearing his yellow costume. The book was meant to deal with who the character was underneath his mask. Obviously, later writers kind of ignored it and did whatever they wanted. But it is a testament to like the character's popularity that his solo book lasted for 189 monthly issues. And in one form or another, Wolverine has always had a solo title since then. And what is really interesting is that like just a couple of days before this anniversary, Ryan Reynolds posted a picture of like Hugh Jackman in the classic yellow costume that we normally associate with Wolverine. So after like nearly 25 years on the big screen, we're finally getting to see Hugh Jackman in yellow spandex. Really excited for Deadpool 3 and cannot wait until it comes out next year. But happy 35th anniversary to the Wolverine comic book. Next we get to 10 years ago. This is on July 12th, 2013. We have the release of the following movies. Fruitvale Station, Grown Ups 2, and Pacific Rim. I haven't seen Fruitvale Station yet, so I can't really comment on it, but this was directed by Ryan Coogler and stars Michael B. Jordan. I assume this is the movie that got Coogler the job of directing Black Panther, so it is probably worth checking out. I saw Grown Ups 2, and I remember liking it. I mean, it's one of those like stupid Adam Sandler movies, but I had a good time, and I would recommend it for anybody who enjoys his stuff. Then there's Pacific Rim, which is directed by Guillermo del Toro. Del Toro is really one of my favorite directors because of the passion that he puts into all of his projects, and Pacific Rim isn't an exception to that. Before I talk about this movie, let me just say that I know the story isn't anything spectacular, but I think the movie succeeds in like pretty much every other area. It's a classic giant robots fighting giant monsters, something that I got every day when I was a kid when I watched Power Rangers. However, the world that Del Toro creates here is so believable and realistic that it really gives you something that you have never seen before. So yeah, it's kind of like a love letter to those old monster movies, but it also fits well with like modern sensibilities. That's why if you're a monster fan, I really recommend checking this out. Idris Elba is also in this, and I think watching him act in this movie and that speech he gives at the end really cinched it for me on like what an amazing talent this dude is. Now I know they tried to continue Pacific Rim a couple of times with a sequel and an anime series, but none of it really captured the magic of the original. There was something special when Del Toro was on board, which none of the sequels managed to replicate since he wasn't really involved in them. A shame, but what can you do? Happy 10 years to Pacific Rim. Our last thing for July 12th, also 10 years ago, July 12th, 2013, we have this interesting news story where PayPal accidentally gave a Pennsylvania man named Chris Reynolds a lump sum of, you won't believe it, 92 quadrillion, 233 trillion, 720 billion, 368 million, $547,800 into his account. And if you want to know how much money that is, the world's richest man at the time, Carlos Slim, Mexican mogul, only had 67 billion in his account. So yeah, it's like this guy had over 1 million times more than like the richest person at that time. So and that's insane. So for a brief moment, like this nobody Chris Reynolds guy, he was the world's first quadrillionaire. Yeah, now sadly PayPal like quickly corrected their mistakes, so Reynolds never got to spend any of his money. I wonder what he would have done with all that cash though, if this was legit. I know for me, I'd probably pay off all my debts, quit my day job, and vacation at Disney World the rest of my life. Uh, yeah, but PayPal wouldn't allow that. And anyway, happy 10 years, happy 10 years ago since Chris Reynolds made his first quadrillion and quickly lost it. All right, now we get to July 13th. Also, a bunch of stuff on this day. First is 100 years ago. This is July 13th, 1923. We have the birth of the Hollywood sign. Originally, this was called the Hollywood Land sign, and it was built simply as a form of advertising for then up and coming housing development. It was originally supposed to be temporary, but what's funny is that the sign became so associated with the area that it ended up becoming a permanent fixture. In 1949, Hollywood Land changed its name to Hollywood, but the sign still remained, and it is there to this day. I haven't been to Hollywood yet, still dreaming about it. But if you're in the area, check out the sign that became synonymous with that region 100 years ago on this day. Next is 75 years ago. This is July 13th, 1948. We have the birth of Daphne Maxwell Reid. This is the actress who is most famous for acting in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So she played the role of Vivian Banks on that show from seasons 4 through 6. She replaced Janet Hubert Witten, who acted as Vivian from seasons 1 to 3. Now, even when I was a kid, I noticed the change between Janet Hubert to Daphne Maxwell Reid, but I always preferred like Daphne Maxwell Reid's performance. I always felt like she fit the family a lot better than Janet Hubert did. With Daphne Maxwell Reid, I could see her being Hillary's mom. I couldn't say the same for like Janet Hubert, who looked more like Tatiana or Carlton's mother only. It also helps like Fresh Prince is one of those like rare shows that only got better as it went on. So even if you were like bothered by the casting a little bit, you could ignore it just because the writing on that show was very good. Now Daphne Maxwell Reid is also the wife of actor Tim Reid, who was the father on the show Sister Sister. So there's definitely a dynasty of acting in that family. However, I don't think Daphne or her husband have done much since the 90s, maybe a cameo here or there, but they haven't been prominent in the spotlight in the way that the other Fresh Prince actors have been, like Will Smith or James Avery or Alfonso Ribeiro. Yeah, but anyway, happy 75th birthday to Daphne Maxwell Reid. Next is 50 years ago. This is July 13th, 1973. We have the premiere of the film Cleopatra Jones. I mentioned in a previous episode that blaxploitation was all the rage in the early 1970s. A lot of those films had male leads, but we also got a couple like this one where black women were the star. This movie was pretty popular when it came out. We also got a sequel to it. in 1975 titled Cleopatra Jones and the Casino of Gold. Check out both movies if you're a fan. So happy 50th anniversary to Cleopatra Jones. Next is 35 years ago. This is July 13th, 1988. We have the release of the Clint Eastwood movie The Deadpool. This is the fifth and final film in the Dirty Harry series, and it is also the first action movie for Liam Neeson. I think this movie is also how the comic book character Deadpool got his name. I mean, there's never been any confirmation of it, but since the comic Deadpool came out only a couple of years after the Deadpool movie, I can't imagine there not being a link. So yeah. So anyway, so happy 35 years to the Deadpool. Um, Also 35 years ago, again on July 13th, 1988, we have the birth of actor Colton Hayes. Colton Hayes is best known for his role of Roy Harper, Green Arrow's sidekick on the TV show Arrow. But I'm really intrigued by this guy's behind the scenes struggles. I read his memoir last year titled Miss Memory Lane, and it really goes into some of the hardships that this guy has faced, not only working in the entertainment industry as a gay man, but also his personal struggles like losing his mom to liver disease, or his sister to cancer. So his career and his life have had a lot of like ups and downs in the past decade. If anyone has a chance to read his memoir, I would recommend it. I think it is relatable to a lot of people in his position. The guy's a good actor too. Like the only thing I've really seen him in is Arrow, but I hear that he also acted in like a Teen Wolf and American Horror Story. So check those out too if you're interested. Happy 35th birthday to Colton Haynes. And lastly, on July 13th, we have 10 years ago. July 13th, 2013, this is the premiere of the TV show Beware the Batman. Now, Batman cartoons tend to go in like one direction or the other. You have the dark ones like Batman, the animated series, or The Batman. And then you have the lighter ones like Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Now, this one goes back to being really dark, Beware the Batman. I haven't seen this show yet, and I don't really know a lot of people who have. There's not a lot of talk about this one online. It only lasted a short while with one season of 26 episodes. So I guess it wasn't that good, but if you want to check it out, it's available on HBO Max to see. Happy 10 years to Beware the Batman. Now let's move on to July 14th. This is 25 years ago, July 14th, 1998. We have the release of the direct-to-video film Dennis the Menace Strikes Again. This is a sequel to 1993's Dennis the Menace, but it doesn't have any of the same actors in it. I haven't seen either movie, so I can't really recommend it or not. But I do like the Dennis the Menace comic strip, so I thought it was notable to at least mention it. I also found out that this was the last performance for comedian Don Rickles, so I thought to mention that as well. Now Don Rickles didn't die immediately after, until like 20 he died in 2017, but after this movie the only things that he did were like voiceover performances. Like he played Mr. Potato Head in the Toy Story movies, yeah, and then after, yeah, so he never really had like any major live action roles after this. But anyway, happy 25 years to Dennis the Menace Strikes Again. All right, now we get to July 15th. First is 50 years ago, July 15th, 1973, we have the birth of actor Brian Austin Green. Now it turns out that Austin isn't actually this actor's middle name. In fact, this dude has no middle name. He only took the name Austin because there was another actor in SAG already called Brian Green, and SAG rules discourage two actors from having the same name. Now, Brian Austin Green's his most famous role was as David Silver on Beverly Hills 90210. But this dude has also been like in a lot of other stuff. He was a series regular on the shows Wedding Band, Anger Management, Freddy, Terminator: The Sarah Chronicles. He was also offered a chance to be a regular on One Tree Hill, but he turned it down so he could play Metallo on Smallville. What can I say? The dude makes some smart career choices, and some smart life choices. Like the dude's a good look. The dude is good looking, so it's obviously no surprise that he can get married to somebody like Megan Fox for a long time. So kudos to him. Happy 50th birthday to Brian Austin Green. Now next is 35 years ago. This is July 15th, 1988, we have the release of the films A Fish Called Wanda and Die Hard. I haven't seen either of these movies yet, but both of them are regarded as classics. I know there's a big question about Die Hard that comes up every December. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie or a movie that just happens to be set during Christmas? The question is obviously pedantic, but I don't consider Die Hard a Christmas movie. I mean, just look at the poster. Clearly, the emphasis is to show that this is an action movie. Christmas is not the main draw, so you can't call it a Christmas movie. But whatever, haters will hate. So happy 35 years to A Fish Called Wanda and Die Hard. And the last anniversary for this episode is 25 years ago, July 15th, 1998. We have the release of the film There's Something About Mary. This is another film that I have not seen yet, and I really can't believe I never saw it. I saw the trailers as a kid, and I was like totally enamored by Cameron Diaz at the time. But this movie was rated PG-13, and there was no way that my parents would let me go see that. So this kind of got put into the back of my mind. I was hoping to eventually find it on cable or streaming, but alas, I never got lucky. Thankfully, I will get the chance to see it one. Hopefully, I'll get the chance to see it one day and give my thoughts on it. Happy 25 years to There's Something About Mary. Before we wrap up, there's a couple of things to get to. First, I did get a chance to see a movie this week. I saw the film Theater Cam, which I really enjoyed. I thought this was a funny movie. The premise is that you have these group of adults trying to save like a theater cam that is about to go out of business, and then they put on a fundraiser to try to raise money for it. Now, I mean, like this is a premise that's been done like so many times, but this movie still manages to like make it funny. And there's a lot of jokes that are geared towards like actors and people in the entertainment industry. So I don't know if it'll resonate well with a mainstream audience, but I liked it and would highly recommend it for anybody looking to have a fun time at a movie. And lastly, I want to acknowledge the death of Manny Cotto, who passed away earlier this week on July 9th, 2023, at the age of 62. Manny Cotto has worked on some of my all-time favorite TV shows. He was the showrunner for Star Trek Enterprise, 24, and Dexter. Manny Cotto did seasons 3 and 4 of Enterprise, which I really think turned the show around. Now, prior to that, Enterprise was decent, but it lacked a clear direction. Whatever like Cotto did at the time really pulled the show out of that rut that it was in, and seasons 3 and 4 of Enterprise gave us some of not only the best episodes in Enterprise, but some of the best episodes in all of Star Trek. And Manny Cotto was the executive producer on seasons 5 through 8 of 24, and later 24 Live Another Day and 24 Legacy. I'll admit that the later seasons of 24 weren't as good as the originals, but season 5 has some of the best twists and turns the show has ever produced. The Manny Cotto also directed a couple of the Disney Channel original movies that I grew up with. He did The Other Me, and Xenon the Sequel. I had a couple of story problems with both of these movies, but overall I did enjoy them as a kid growing up. So I have to give a hats off to this guy for being a writer, director, and producer for a lot of like what I loved growing up, and still enjoy now. Rest in peace, Manny Cotto. And that's it for this episode. Tune in next week for episode 16. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook and Instagram feed to stay up to date on all the anniversaries. And remember, keep rewinding the timeline. Bye.